Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar. I see quite a few familiar faces, so familiar names. Thank you for coming back to our webinar. And for all of those who are new to our series, welcome and thank you for joining us. My name is Marina Tkachenko and I am the Marketing Communications Manager at Myriad USA. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar focused on engaging all generations of donors. We have quite an expert panel lined up, and I can't wait to introduce the moderator and begin the discussion. But before we do, please just allow me a few moments to introduce Myriad USA, but also mention a few housekeeping notes. This webinar is part of Myriad USA's series on sharing best practices in fundraising, and it's designed to help nonprofit professionals worldwide to enhance their fundraising practices. Myriad USA facilitates thoughtful, effective giving across borders. We provide donors with a simple and efficient platform to support nonprofit initiatives overseas. And we also partner with foreign nonprofits, and many of you in this room are our partners, so special spotlight to you, and offer them cost-effective solutions to raise funds in the US through our service called American Friends Fund. The chat is open for comments and reactions, so I welcome you to put in the chat where you're joining us from, where you're based, what institution you're representing. It would be really good for us for the panelists as well, to see who's in the room, but also for you to meet other professionals joining us today. But we do please request that you put your Q&As, your questions and your comments in the Q&A box. We'll have a time to answer those live, but we'll see them only through the box. So please put those there. And also translation is also available through closed captioning. So please click the Show Captions button in the controls sidebar and select your preferred language. And lastly, the recording and any resources that we mentioned today, we will share those in a follow-up communication. Okay, wonderful. And I'm seeing someone joining from Argentina, from South Africa. Welcome, and I hope to see many more friends. Yes, welcome, Amsterdam. Okay, while you do that, let me kick us off by introducing the moderator of today's panel. Dr. Holly Miori, and we're going to see Dr. Holly right there, has a 20-year career in fundraising and foundation work, raising funds locally and nationally in areas as diverse as higher education, healthcare, social services, and more. And she has held her Certified Fundraising Executive Certificate since 2013. She currently serves as the Associate Vice Chancellor Development and Chief Development Officer at the University of Missouri St. Louis. She also focuses her research on trends in philanthropy. Dr. Holly published her book, Millennial Philanthropy: Next Generation Fund Development for Professionals and Nonprofits. And there's much more to say about Dr. Holly Miori, and you'll see the full bio posted in the chat as well. But welcome, Dr. Holly. We really appreciate you joining us today, and I'll let you have the floor and kick off the panel and introduce the panelists.
Well, on behalf of our panelists here shortly, I just want to thank Myriad USA for having us. We're so excited to be here. I'm going to kick us off by introducing both of our panelists. So let me welcome to the floor Gurlane, who is the Vice President for Innovation at Development Guild. I'll have Gurlane put her screen on. So before joining Development Guild, Gurlane held several key fundraising roles in donor relations, special events, major gifts, and database management at Catholic Charities at Archdiocese of New York, Cambridge, in America. She will be a delight to be with us today. Also was noted to me in a pre-call that she was a teacher, so has this unique experience and perspective which is what we'll talk about today when we talk about generations. Also has a great article that we'll share out as well. She serves as an executive search and fundraising consultant and moderator for Big Question, a live community powered planning tool that helps mission driven organizations address complex strategic and fundraising challenges. She also leads Development Guild's DEI program, designing company-wide learning experience and advising on equitable culture and policies, thinking about those big questions. And then also as a member of Women of Color in Fundraising and Philanthropy. I've spoken for them before, great organization as well. And then and holds a Master's of Arts in Biology from Hofstra University and a bachelor's degree in molecular genetics from the University of Rochester. Wow, so smart, so amazing. We're so excited to have you, Ghislaine. And so excited to have you. Now I'm going to introduce our next speaker. Nikki is one of the GiveSmart Donor CRM co-founders. Really is going to help us think about, as we're thinking about generations, that segmentation work. Has been in the nonprofit community for over 19 years. So you're trying not to say 20 years yet? Is that part of it?
Yeah, you got me.
I finally just started saying it. It's fine. Her first taste of fundraising was in 2006 when she developed a philanthropic committee among friends to raise funds from Alex's lemonade stand. What an amazing group and a great, amazing background that you have. Also has been working with the National Kidney Foundation. In 2010, she combined her love of philanthropy with her background in computer science. We're amongst some amazing women here to start a career in the donor management software industry to help nonprofit organizations save time while raising more money. That CRM work is really important. How can we talk to our donors with time and energy, right? She volunteers regularly for a local homeless shelter and spends time teaching small business marketing strategies to women entrepreneurs in her community. Nikki, where are you coming from today? What city and
Just
state?
outside of Philadelphia. Go Birds.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, we are so excited to have both of you as panelists. As I said, I wanted to thank Myriad USA and Faircom for putting this panel together. I know we want to get to the meat of our work, but I do want to frame our time together as we're talking about, as Ghislaine graciously pointed out to me, 6 generations here, both in the United States and globally. We've got silent generation, baby boomer, Generation X, millennials, Gen Z, and the alphas. The alphas are still being born. We even discussed whether or not we're ready for the betas to start talking about them, which make the 7th generation still living and thriving, giving money, volunteering, serving on our boards, and serving as our staff still. And so how can we think about these generations thriving in our organizations as volunteers, staff, board members, and donors? And so I want us to just think through what makes a generation, makes a cohort. Those are things like technology, life circumstances. And Nikki, you'll have a lot to say about technology, I think. Ghislaine, you'll have a lot to say about life circumstances, but both of y'all will get to dive into those kind of questions. So I'm going to kick us off to talk about trends. Trends sometimes also are things that hold true throughout the years. And let's start talking about the big picture. How are giving behaviors shifting across the generations? What drives trust now? And what can we do now to build into the future? Ghislaine, I'm going to start with you. And then Nikki, I want you to answer that same question. But I'll be the timekeeper if one of you's getting too long.
Juicy, juicy question. Thank you, Dr. Holly. I'm going to start with a story because I fancy myself a bit of a storyteller. I'm a consultant, and so I spend a lot of time talking to my colleagues about fundraising. And every time I have this conversation with my colleagues who are Gen Z, they always come back to 2 things: community, trusting each other, and they talk about social media, especially TikTok. And I think about when I was in front of donors, not even 4 years ago, donors who were largely Gen X and older like me. We never mentioned social media. That was not a conversation. In terms of trust and where a desire for philanthropy came from, that was watching their elders. That was watching their elders. So it strikes me as, whoa, what this is a big shift that we go from an internal, really cultivating and fostering philanthropy to it being external. I trust my friends. I trust TikTok.
Mhm.
What I'm seeing, and that has been quite informative for me in terms of fundraising and donors of the different generations. So I'll leave it there for now, and we can circle back and elaborate. But I'm excited to hear what
Perfect.
Nikki has to say.
Nikki, what about you? What's that big trend you want to talk about across the generations?
It's surprising to see that the younger generations are more willing to use their voice and their time, especially if they can't volunteer monetarily. So while it's not necessarily surprising, what is surprising about that is that the younger generations are finding snail mail more of a commodity. So it's making a comeback.
Oh, I'll appreciate that. So, Gerlin, let me respond a little bit to your work and your commentary there. They are definitely, I find this in my academic research and in my practice, is that the millennials and Gen Z, so our millennials are 45 and younger, to kind of give context so people who may not know our cutoff years, is that we are seeing them use it for in Gen Z and our alphas. So alphas are still being born, but could already be in school, kind of that already in college age, even that young college age. They're using it for a litmus to verify. There's a lack of trust in the nonprofit space. So they use it to verify things you
Mhm.
say. They may read the mail, right?
Yeah.
As Nikki commented, but then they're going to go out and verify it. They may be checking Reddit. They may be checking social media posts. They may be
Mhm.
checking other things. Whether we agree or disagree, that's not what we're here to talk about. We're talking about the reality of our global organizations. And do you have a social media presence for these organizations to go in and help work with other generations? And then Nikki, let me do some feedback on that. We are seeing a resurgent because it's so rare that you're building a relationship through mail. It's special now. The only time we may only ever see paper mail for a relationship is for a wedding, for a graduation. So when you do mail something that is special, that tells that story, Gerlaine, you talked about telling that story about the great work that you're doing. They find it like, oh, you did that. Some of my additional research said, especially with the millennials and a little bit with Gen Z, is that they would get upset that you wouldn't ask face to face. You wouldn't ask in a special way, just like you would do their parents. So this is be that baby boomer traditionally and a little bit of Gen X, because you ask just like my parents. Why won't you ask me just like my parents? And
Mhm.
it's a shift. Maybe it's a shift in the of coming of age, is what I would comment there. But these are the things that we're seeing, and it's exciting, right? Because they're now giving money. So I want to think about that and how can we continue to think about our next generations. Um, so I'm gonna focus in a little on Nikki for a second. But Gerlaine, you may have some commentary there. From your work with decoding donors, you did this great article recently on segmenting donors, but it's also your work, your day job, and also some of your volunteer work with decoding donors webinar that you just did. What surprises you about how younger donors engage beyond the tech lens, and how should nonprofits think differently about outreach across generations?
This question, I had a different answer last week, and I've changed my answer. Over the weekend, I was at a conference for the Giving Institute, and a lot of the sessions were all about AI. And I was surprised to see a pretty even split in the room between liking and disliking AI. And a lot of people were encouraging the use of AI for things like thank you letters and knocking out those tasks quickly. But I'm on the other side of that fence. So, kind of to tie back with the snail mail comment, when you're looking at a generation that's so exposed to technology and AI, and they know everything's fake or they know everything's real, if you're removing the tech lens from that by using something like snail mail, you're immediately removing the threat of, wait a minute, could this be AI generated? Even if you are using AI to help create that content, just kind of taking a step back and removing that and using that more personal touch, or that physical touch of the snail mail. So I think that we kind of have to be careful with that AI and how our younger generations are immediately putting up that guard.
Mm-hmm. Ghislaine, do you have any feedback, commentary? Even
Yeah, I too attended a business conference last week, and one of the questions was, one of the focuses were on kind of balancing technology with humanity. And so one of the suggestions was perhaps you don't always use ChatGPT to create an email or a letter. You have a voice. And again, it's a storytelling. It may not be quote unquote perfect, neither is AI. It never will be. But to have that balance between technology and humanity, and it's different depending on your context as well too. So what I always share with those who ask me in terms of AI and technology is to look at where it is that you work. Look within your context and decide accordingly. What works over there may not necessarily work over there, but at the end of the day, we are dealing with humans. And that.
yeah. No matter the generation, right? There, you have a responsibility as a nonprofit, as an individual, as an executive in your organization
Mhm.
to the ethics of our work, right? I see someone commenting that they're on the CFRE board, and there is no other. You have a CFRE, you're a member of AFP, you're a member of XYZ organization. There is the ethics of our work, and we have to do that. I think you and I, we all three were on a pre-call, and we were discussing the low risk and the high risk of our work and using the AI. Now, are you building an agenda and maybe you have a little bit of writer's block? Maybe using the AI to help you kind of do that starter dose sometimes. There's low risk there, but the high risk of using the AI sometimes may be where you're not seeing the human side of our organizations, or maybe even just an internal email to one of your staff. So there is that risk of dehumanizing our work. We're in the work of relationships, and how can we continue to do that?
And if I could just quickly circle back to the trust.
Oh,
Trust
definitely.
is so difficult to build and so easy to dismantle. And we're seeing a decrease in trust of nonprofits, right? So if you're going to be using AI, how to be transparent about how that's being used with those who support you. So have that conversation as well too.
And we're seeing this with, again, I'm going to circle back on some of my research, is that we see this high distrust of large institutions for millennials, and then it started petering down to the next round of generations because of behavior we were seeing over the decades. And because of that is we have to build that trust. It's kind of all on all of us, both in the United States and globally, of ensuring that we don't have things, whether it's down to the direct mail piece to knowing where the money goes and how can we be part of that solution to help build trust back in the nonprofit space as well. So I love that. Well, I'm going to jump us over to another topic that we want to make sure we go through, and that's called myth busting: what works and what doesn't. Now we're looking at the landscape and we want to confront assumptions, or maybe we'll call it the way it's always been done. What outdated ideas might be limiting our success with engaging younger? I'm going to start with younger donors. So younger, I'm going to go with kind of that millennial, Gen Z, and even alpha. We're starting to see the alphas engage in philanthropy, whether it's through school or activating on their own, like Alex's Lemonade Stand. Nikki, I know you're active with them and you're seeing some of the younger generations get excited about that work of nonprofit engagement. So what are some of the things that we want to confront those assumptions, or I sometimes don't like calling it that. I want to say the way it's always been done. What are some things? And Nikki, I'm going to kick off with you, and then Ghislaine, I'm going to have you respond.
Sure. So while I don't want to give a direct response of something that should change different things, work for different people at different times. One thing that I've learned that I find really compelling is that our definition of outdated is always changing. So, 20 years ago, outdated might have meant 10 years old. But now outdated is anything over 3 years old. And that time gap is closing, and they're projecting in the next 10 years, outdated could be as much as half a day old. So I would encourage you to look at your strategies, look at everything that you're doing, and maybe say, okay, well, what have we not revisited within the last 3 years that we could maybe tweak? And how do you think about tweaking that? Ask your donors, give them what they want.
I appreciate that. Elaine.
Yeah, thank you, Nikki. Wonderful response. In terms of myth, I'm going to go with the myth. The myth that the younger generation, the Gen Z, the millennial, the alphas, do not give. They don't care, is what I hear a lot from the Gen X and above, and that's simply not true. I believe that part of what we need to consider is broadening what we mean when we say give. It's not just a treasure, it's not just the money. You mentioned volunteer, Dr. Holly, so it's the gift of time, it's the gift of talent, it's the gift of ties, right? I'm introducing you to my community. So the younger generation does give. They want to give. They're about social justice and making change in the world. They may not have the funds yet. We have a wealth transfer occurring as we speak, but they give in different ways. And even with the money, I think that their definition of giving will broaden, and so will ours have to be as well too. That's what I would add to the conversation here.
And I appreciate that they're giving and giving differently for the younger generations. I know from some of my experience, they don't listen to their parents. They respect them, but they don't listen to their parents' philanthropy goals. They have their own goals. They want to make their own way. And they give dramatically more. We knew this in every generation, but it's dramatically more, 3 times more than any other generation from an annual giving standpoint, if they get them to volunteer. And they will even volunteer more if you engage them well. Treat them as an individual, think of that. I want to comment a little bit more on the trends of what Nikki said about making sure we're talking through the market. So I've had the privilege of talking a little bit about my research across different markets. And I can tell you, based on different markets, now this is more US based, is that every market, every major market, they'll say, oh, this thing is the hottest thing for social media in our market. And it's different. And it's not based on time bound. It's based on, I can be 3 weeks apart and everything is different based on your market. So I think it's really getting to know your donors or your prospective donors, getting to know your volunteers. You have to understand your demographics and really understand it, because it's based on your physical bound of market, whatever market means to you. And I know we've got some global friends on this call. So your market may be coming into the US or going into the European Union areas, or it may be, whatever that market means to you. And so when you got a really good handle on it, you'll have better strategy. So it may not be a trend, it's a point in time conversation. So you've got smarter strategies, because you may have an organization that's not staffed with 100 people. You've got to just recognize that and spend that time there. It's better strategies there. I'm so excited to think about these myth busting, but do you think it's different across multi-generational relationships? I want to kind of spotlight that question a little differently. Do you think those myth busting is different across our generations? Now, remember, we were talking about 6 generations, possibly a 7th coming soon. What do we think about that?
Yeah, I mean, for example, when you're thinking about Gen Z or millennials, the myth that they're always on their phones 24/7, or the Gen Z stare, that these people are they want to be engaged with So don't just only hit them on their phone, hit them in different places. Like we were saying before, I think it was you, Dr. Holly, who said wow, you're engaging with me like you engaged with my parents. It's nice to be acknowledged and feel respected at that level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
Appreciate
even
that.
with the older generation too, don't think they're not using technology. I mean, I have people who are 20 years older than me, 35 years older than me, who are more adept at TikTok than I will ever be. So, or to think, oh, a particular person is maybe not interested in volunteering and actually going out. It may not be physically demanding. I think a trend I hear in what all three of us is generalizations play their role, certainly in terms of making things a little bit easier, but everyone is an individual. And to
Mm-hmm.
not make assumptions and put people into boxes, because it has humbled me many times to make assumptions about a particular donor partner perspective, donor partner based on purely their generation.
Mm-hmm. And related to that, what has worked well for our older generations? Maybe our silent generation, our baby boomer generations. That's maybe not as good of a strategy for our younger generations. And Nikki, I'll start off with you since you're our our person on the call that does segmentation. Where do you think what strategies are better? Again, I want to also recognize Gurlane's comment about we don't always want to put people in boxes.
Yeah,
But we're talking maybe a little bit on generalizations here.
sure. Well, one of my favorite stats on segmentation groups would be that donors who give 14 out of the last 15 consecutive years, which I would hope you can generalize that as older donors, um, those people are the most likely to be primed for an end of life giving conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a pretty standard safe one across the board. I don't know people coming right out of the womb giving, but you never know.
Yeah. They haven't as many opportunities to give, right? For our younger generations. Now I have seen it. We are seeing mid-30s starting to do plan gifts. Maybe they're doing their first will because of life events. But statistically, we're talking about statistics, right? Generalizations of statistics. If you have a limited budget, you're more likely to need to connect with your friends in the baby boomer generation. Silent generation, you may be a little behind as an organization, but doesn't mean you shouldn't talk to them. But those are the kind of things there. The statistics are the 14 of the 15 years. Those are amazing things. I've heard 8 out of 10 before as the prime thing from our friends at the National Council of Plan Giving. But the 14 of 15 means they are super ready to have those conversations. They are your best friends. And those are the things that we need to make sure and candidly, they may have already had it in there and you just haven't talked to them to document the conversation. And that's really important. Gurlene, do you have a different perspective on those strategies for our older generations?
I don't. I'm appreciative of what Nikki shared in terms of the consistency of giving. You didn't mention the amount, right? I think sometimes we
Yeah.
get focused on the amount. It's the consistency, and we even see this with major and transformational giving as well too. Consistency in giving, and in terms of the silent generation of baby boomers, with baby boomers and silent generation, what I found is that there is more trust placed in an organization, unlike what we're seeing with the millennials, right? So there is more loyalty. And that loyalty is repaid, if you will, or acknowledged by in-person, more human to human engagement.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones who tended to say yes when I called to say, "Can I come visit you? Can we have lunch?" They're the ones who jumped on a Zoom during COVID. So that person, I want to see you. I want to be in your energy. I want to know. I've even been told I gave because you came to visit me. You
Mm-hmm.
represent the organization, and because I trust you, I'm going to give because I can give to so many. So that interpersonal, that touch, that presence is what I found from my experience
Mm-hmm.
is very meaningful to the baby boomers and above.
Mm-hmm. And let's talk a little bit about the dichotomy differences between our generations, of how they give and volunteer differently. So our friends that are silent generation, and it came down a little bit into our baby boomer generations, but it's really present in the silent generation. They give and volunteer as a family unit. That was very much part of the generational differences that we're seeing. And so when you're having conversations with the silent generation, so our oldest generation that's still alive, is that they're saying, I'm going to bring my kids into the conversation. I'm going to expect them to volunteer with me. I'm expecting them to be at the table during the conversations. When we do the millennial conversation, especially in my research, you see a dramatic change in those conversations where there's this extreme sense of independence that came with it. Where if you're trying to get, even if you're doing a multi-generational relationship, they want to be independent of their parents or grandparents in the organization. Doesn't mean you can't capture them as volunteers, as donors, as board members, but they don't want that expectation that they're there because of their grandparents or parents relationship, or aunts or uncles, or other family members. And they don't want you to volunteer automatically in this maybe project because of the family relationship. They want independence. It might be the age they're in. It might be, it's still a little unclear. It might just be the circumstances in which they grew up. But there's this really interesting dichotomy there, that it is again, Gurlene was very clear, and I appreciate that perspective of each person's different. And we might have some people on the call who are coming from cultural differences as well. But we're talking about the generalities. We are definitely seeing this extreme shift in these generational differences, that we have to recognize that they want to be treated independent of each other. So these are just these generational changes that we're seeing, that they want that independence as well, that they want to be respected too. Going back to Nikki's comment, I want the mail too. You mail my parents, you should mail me too. So it's something to think about. Now let's talk a little bit before we get into Q&A here in a little bit about practical implementation. We've kind of alluded to it a little bit, but I want to how to operationalize all of this work with our different generations and insight into action. How do we get these trends and myth-busting realities and build systems, stories, and culture that engage donors now and decades from now? Sometimes our work can take years to build into place. And we have to recognize that. We alluded to that planned giving work that sometimes can take those 14 gifts over 15 years. Sometimes our work now may take years to systematize, right? We're looking back at some of the legacy work that our predecessors have done, or maybe you've been at your organization for 20 years. Now you're like, oh, I got to work on a list today. So that's great action to think about. But Gurlene, I want to think about, what is the highest impact first step for a team with limited resources, like all of us do, to operationalize multi-generational engagement?
Great question. I'm going to step into Nikki's territory a little bit.
That's great.
And she will elaborate. She knows much more on this topic. But for me, it really comes back to the database. No matter what you use, it can be a Excel spreadsheet. It doesn't really matter. But that you are documenting information that you learn about your donors. You cannot segment if you don't have that information. So whatever you use, make sure that you have a place to store information about your donors. And we're talking about generation, so it's knowing what year a donor, prospective donor was born. So if you don't have that information in whatever database that you use, you might consider a simple survey. And survey can be in a direct mail. You can email it. You can text it. Use all your channels. You can put a QR code on social media, asking the question, "How old are you?" If you don't feel comfortable sharing that, what generation are you in? And also expressing what that information is for. You might also include in the survey, what's the best way to engage you? What would surprise and delight you? Collecting that information to put into whatever your system is. So I come from a background of managing databases, and I always find that that is the foundation, again, in Nikki's territory, of an excellent and thriving organization, to care for that database and update it regularly and engage and be transparent with your donors and prospective donors as to what you're doing with that data. We want to serve you better. We want to know you better.
Mhm. And be genuine in the questions.
Absolutely.
I
Genuine.
think that is, and make sure not only to leave it in Excel, but put it back in the database.
Absolutely. If you
The-
have one, because we know we're dealing with organizations of various sizes, and at
Yep.
least in the United States, databases can be very expensive. Yes, there are different price points, but if you don't have that wherever, I guess what we're saying here is have a place where you store information about your donors.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't leave it in just one person's
Absolutely.
email or something. If you're going to do that, if you don't have a CRM, a customer relation management software, put it back in the groups message, whatever
Exactly.
that may be.
Exactly. Share it. You can, in a survey, you can do it in person too if you're going to visit someone, the silent generation or baby boomers. So
Mhm.
whatever way, get to know the people who support your work.
I love it. Nikki, what about you? What are some high impact first steps for a team with limited resources to operationalize multi-generational engagement?
I have two thoughts for this. The first one, everybody should be thanking their donors as quickly as possible. Donors who are thanked within the first 24 hours of the gift being received have an average retention rate of 60.9%, whereas the industry average hovers between 40 and 45%. So just making that simple change and prioritizing thanking your donors as quickly as possible will serve you well over the long run. Now, the other side of that question, or my other thought on that question, you should consider the audience for your campaigns. Your audiences for your campaigns are probably shifting as you move from campaign to campaign. For example, if you're doing a community-based campaign, you're probably going to lean more towards your younger generations versus if you're doing a major gift mailing campaign, that might be a different group. I don't want to make any assumptions, but consider the people that you're reaching out to and what your goals are and adjust your campaign segments accordingly. So the segment that you use for your upcoming peer-to-peer campaign might be very different, and consider what that means to them and how those people like to be solicited.
Mhm. Well, I appreciate those comments about how we can really think about our limited resources and not recognizing everybody have, we're living in Excel, we're living in a CRM. And I will also comment because I just went into a new role about a year ago and having to rely on notes from predecessors or people who've retired. And think about the notes you want to leave for yourself because maybe you'll be there a really long time, the 15 years, 14 gifts in 15 years, and you're having to rely on your own memory. That conversation from a long time ago, or you may retire in that position, or we move on, and having to keep those good notes. And that person is going to, hopefully, that donor will age in place. And so you're now having to grow that relationship with the organization and having to just challenge all of us on behalf of the whole nonprofit community to keep those good notes, remember those meaningful conversations you talked about, even if you don't do a super robust survey that's complex. Some complex organizations I've been there, and I've also done some that are smaller where I'm, the staffer of one, and you're doing these different conversations about what is your birthday? How do you not know what generation someone's in if you don't know their birthday? Are they able to do a type of gift? Those kind of things. What gets you excited about the organization? How do you want to be engaged? These are the kind of questions we need to ask somebody because we don't want to make an assumption. We may make an assumption they only want digital and they want that paper, no matter their age or relationship back to the institution. Maybe they have a job where they move every 2 years. So it may be hard for them they only want a digital relationship with the organization for a variety of reasons, right? So these are the kind of things we've got to continue to think about. So I'm going to turn it over to Nikki again. Based on your work and the Decoding Donors webinar, what's one simple change in outreach or data use that nonprofits can make immediately today, this week, this month, to better connect across the generations.
I'm going to have to fall back on my last comment that if you can find a way to make the time to thank your donors right away,
Yeah.
you're going to do better, and that's going to add up over time. And just to kind of highlight how the financial impact of what that could look like, if you have a donor or if your average donor's lifetime value is $1,000,
Mhm.
at the industry average of a retention rate of 40 to 45%, that donor is worth $1,667 over the course of their lifetime. At an average retention rate of 60.9%, that same 1,000 donor is actually worth $2,500 over the course of their lifetime. So just by thanking your donors right away, that's a huge increase of what that person is worth to you over their lifetime. And they're going to be staying with you longer. They're going to be telling their friends about you. It has a domino effect.
And I'll jump in with that. We've had, more than one consultant I've worked with over the years. I've been that consultant, and they say, "Oh, I can't afford with my limited resources to pay for well screens." Often it's that lifetime giving rate of the $1,000, whether they're the millennial giving $1,000, they're the silent generation who's done $1,000 over the years. Whatever that means, whatever that $1,000 is, right? Is that trigger of $1,000 means they're going to make a major gift, whatever major gift threshold is for your organization. It truly is one of our top ratings that we can use. I can well screen all day, but if their affinity is not there, it's very hard to work through, especially if you haven't saturated your top friends to make sure they're excited to be with your organization, and you've done those face-to-face conversations, and you've made sure they're excited to give at that higher level, whatever that means, no matter the generation. And I think that's where, Nikki, I've never heard that statistic before, but marinating on that for a second, I can see where that definitely would hold true. And how
So
can,
just for your information, that statistic comes directly from the back end of our CRM. We can see how quickly our clients are
wow,
donors.
I love that. And so it's about thanking. And then I think that's where you also want to think about how for across your generations, going back to our conversation about generations, how do they want to be thanked? Maybe that's where you're getting into the generational differences. Is it a letter? Is it a phone call? Is it a text? Right? I've seen this more with our younger generations. The text, as it doesn't look AI driven, right? That trust factor, circling back to the beginning of our conversation. It looks like a real person, right? I tell my team all the time, do it from your cell phone. It's a real number. It's not this AI generated stuff. Does it look like a real, and even put in the text, this is a real person. I know that seems silly sometimes, but that does break through some barriers. And to say that, that will break through those thresholds of getting those real conversations, and to thank them, right? This is a thank you goes a long way. So I want to talk about some other practical implications while we're waiting on. And just a reminder, you can put a question in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. So we're just on standby to get some questions, and I'll keep going through our questions. Gurlane, how can we embed real world examples of inclusive storytelling? And I'm going to chop this question because it's pretty long. Inclusive storytelling, segmented communication, and donor activation that every donor feels engaged regardless of their age.
Yeah, I'm going to start with the last part of that question.
Please chop it up however you like.
Which is every donor feels engaged, which ultimately I think is what we're here to discuss. And I so appreciate what Nikki shared about sending thank yous right away. It's not always easy to do, especially towards the end of the year where so much gifts come in. So this may be a time from this conversation to begin to think about how you're going to quickly thank donors towards the end of the year. And In terms of going back to segmentation as well too, and the more information you have about your donors and your partners in the work that you do, the more precise your segmentations can be. So there can be segmentation by generation, but can also be segmentation with maybe Gen Z and our donors and partners who identify as female. Maybe it's Gen Z who identify as female who volunteer. They have different needs, and you can be very precise in the way that you engage them so that they feel seen. So
Mhm.
really, more information, more precise, more refined segmentation, because the smaller the segmentation, the more a person feels seen, which is what we want. We don't want to always generalize, and we know it's not always easy to not generalize, but if we can make those segmentations more and more refined, I think Nikki has the data that you're likely to see more engagement. Same thing
Yeah.
with storytelling as well too. There are so many perspectives by which a story can be told about the work of a nonprofit. You can have the story told through your donors and partners. Why do you support this organization? Why does it mean so much to me, to you, to your family? You can tell the story through the people who are served. How are they feeling the work that you do by the support that you provide? You can tell the story of an organization through the people who work there. You can tell
Mhm.
the story of an organization through board members, through prospective donors. Why are you even curious about this work? So, inclusivity is about broadening the lens and doing so with as much respect as possible. And the broader the lens, the more you have a sense of what this organization does. And when we talk about the younger generation, they're looking for that proof, they're looking for that impact, they're looking for inclusivity, right?
Mhm.
Not just one particular view, but a broad view of the work that you do. I would also say the different ways of telling a story. You can do
Mhm.
a newsletter, right? You can post on social media. You can send a photograph. That old saying, a picture says 1,000 words. So the different ways that you tell the story and the different perspectives are key, I think, to the totality of understanding what it is that you do and ensuring that people, your prospective donors and your donors, understand the work that you do in a way that speaks to them. Not one size fits all.
I love that. Well, I'm going to switch us over to questions. And some of this I think we've already answered, so I'm going to skip a couple because they came on the top of the hour. But we're going to jump in. How do you avoid alienating one age group while appealing to another?
Mm.
I get asked this question a lot, but I want to see y'all's perspective.
When you don't know how to answer a question with a question, right?
Yeah.
uh, Gosh, I mean, you're never going to. That's always a risk. You're never going to please
Yeah.
everybody. If I was looking at this through a statistic lens, I would look at, how am I going to have the biggest impact? So that would be my priority, understanding where the bulk of my supporters are, but being kind and acknowledging that everything that you say isn't going to apply to everybody. So I think it's okay to have opinions and okay to, you know, take on a certain strategy, as long as you acknowledge that that might not be the fit for everybody and you want to do your best to meet people where they are and to encourage feedback from people who you might be offending or you might not be targeting correctly.
Mhm.
The more you know, the better you'll do.
Yeah. Caroline,
Yeah, I
any comment
agree.
there?
I mean, I would say integrity is key. Like, know who you are as an organization. You're not going to appeal to everyone. So what is important to you? Who are you? My sense and my experience is that donors and prospective donors respect integrity. You're not bending to the whims. You are staunchly in support of what it is that you do, and it's not for everyone, and that's okay.
Yeah. I think I get this question frequently. right? And the one thing that I always want to caution organizations is, especially if you're doing multi-generational work, is they go, oh, we have one millennial on our nonprofit board. And I go, and they're a person of color and they're a woman. And I go, well, how many other of these demographics do you have on your board? And they go, none. Don't put a token person on your board to represent all the things. A couple reasons. If that one person quits or they have to resign for work reasons, you can't put all the demographics onto one person. Also, one person can't represent a whole generation, a whole demographic. You need to put more than one person representing whatever it is that you're serving, right? And all the representations that you're trying to serve. I really do. And also just because it's a pipeline, right? Of people, just like you would your workforce, your volunteers, your donor base. It's a diversity of what that means for your organization. So be careful to just put everything on one person. And so you're alienating one group because you only put one person on there, because the moment one person resigns or quits or whatever may happen, they move away, and they can't be on that board for you anymore. That does create a bit of a strife, right, for you. So that's one of the things that I really will pay attention to. Also, and if you're just large enough of an organization, how does your workforce look related to what you want to serve? Something called representative bureaucracy in academia. How do you represent what you want to serve? And so whatever that means for you. And
And
so
do it with integrity, because
absolutely.
people can see right through it, especially the younger generation.
It's
So
that trust we talked about at the
trust.
top of the hour. Yeah. And so those are some of the things that I've witnessed, that and people are excited when doing it with, not with malice, they're doing it with intent, but just seeing the broader scope of those kind of conversations. And then, so one of the other questions, one of the things which I appreciate this, what's one step leaders can take to make their organization more welcoming to younger fundraisers and donors? The fundraiser question, I appreciate.
Yeah, I do too, because I have to say, going back to the beginning and talking with my colleagues about TikTok, I won't ever go on TikTok. I just have my limitations on social media. And what it made me realize is I don't have to. I think the diversity in your team, so you have, perhaps again, no, not one size fits all, but if there are younger demographics within your team of major gifts, it's for them, TikTok is instantaneous. It's not for me. And going back to that integrity, I can learn about it, but I can't speak it. I can't put the energy towards it the way someone who really is vested. And it may not necessarily be someone who's a younger demographic, but really ensuring that your team is diverse in perspectives and generations, and as many ways that you can afford it to be. And that helps too. I'm also in the recruiting business as well too. And I can tell you that prospective donors, prospective employees do their research. They know who's on your team. And if it's not representative, there will be questions, and you'll have to respond to that as well too. So again, going back to integrity, are you really serious about creating a diverse team, a diverse board? And what does that look like, and how you're communicating it as well too. So be mindful of what you represent, because due diligence is being done on your organization.
I would encourage you to invite those younger generations to meetings, open board meetings, events. Put the message out there that you want input from these younger generations, and host an open meeting. Hey, do you care about injured animals? Well, come and tell us if you have ideas how we can be better about injured animals, whatever it is. But including that invitation, saying that you want them there, at the very least, you're starting that dialogue and allowing that to happen, and removing those barriers. But to that point, how could you do that more effectively? Don't write off Facebook. I know a lot of people are moving away from Facebook. Don't write it off. It still gets a lot of attention. But
Viable.
surprisingly, Instagram stories are more successful. They get more clicks than Instagram posts. So think about stories if you haven't.
Mm-hmm. And answering the question to kind of summarize it, how you can welcome younger fundraisers, whatever young means for you, whatever that demographic that this person may be asking specifically about, or you have the luxury of hiring either as staff, paid staff, or you're looking for volunteers. Whether you're looking at volunteer or board member, I would encourage mentorship. We've got people that can do it through the associations globally or in the United States, or even a fellow board member. I did some research where people love something called the skip line. So they're looking for mentors that are older and wiser. They won't listen to their parents, but they will listen to mentorship 2 generations up, whatever that. So really knowing that volunteer, that fundraiser that's on staff, and they really want mentorship 2 generations ahead because they went through the similar generational issues. It's not the generation above them. Because of that, they will listen to them for workforce issues. It's a really interesting dynamic. So when you've got that opportunity for volunteer to volunteer or paid staff to paid staff, you've got a really great opportunity in the fundraising space to really get an opportunity to mentor up that next generation for your organization. And so just a helpful hint to do that. And I think we've learned some stuff about some great other opportunities. We are in countdown, and I do not want us to lose the sight of that. So I am going to ask my panelists for their 30 seconds of final thoughts. So Ghislaine, I'm going to start with you this time. 30 seconds. What is something you hope someone joining us today or listens afterwards, they take away? 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Well, thank you for being with us, first and foremost. And remember to not put people in boxes, to collect as much information from your donors and prospective donors and partners as possible, to store that information in whatever a database looks like so that everyone on the team can see it and keep building on that information. Humanity first.
Love it. What about you, Nikki?
I'll echo this sentiment. Thank you all for your time today. But one rule that I found that has worked very well for me in professionally and in the donor world and personally as well, surprisingly, and hear me out, I know it's weird, the 5 love languages. So maybe don't go personally touching people, but understanding messaging that resonates with people. Maybe it's words of affirmation, maybe it's spending quality time with them, maybe it's a small gift because you saw a flower that and you were on your way to meet the donor and you know that they like that kind of flower, so you brought it to them. But understanding what messaging will resonate with a person and paying attention to that really will work.
Oh, I love that. And then for me, I just want to wrap us up. We did a lot of conversation around best practice, thinking about 6 generations, possibly a 7th, of all these generations. And we've gotten some helpful hints for all of your organizations, whether you're paid staff, volunteer, and we want you to think critically about your work, either this week or moving forward on how to best prepare your organizations. There were a lot of questions we did not get to. I think Myriad is going to send an email out on how to best connect with each of us. So if you've got follow-up questions, and a couple of the questions were very specific to each of us as panelists, down to CRM for Nikki, Ghislaine on how to work with generations specifically, and for myself on millennial philanthropy. So we look forward to continuing the conversation. We want to thank Myriad USA and Faircom for putting this together. It's such an honor to better your work and better our work and help us think critically on continuing the great work that we all do. And we wish you well on the great work that you all do, seeing some amazing organizations on the chat. So thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Miori, Gurlane, and Nikki for your time and sharing your expertise. And thanks for all of the participants for all of your questions and engagement. And like Dr. Miori said, I'm sorry we didn't get to all of your questions, but we'll be sure to follow up with the recording, but also information about each of the panelists so you can follow up. And we also just value your feedback and kindly request that you take a moment to fill out our post-webinar survey, which will pop up as soon as you exit the webinar. And I'm sure all of the panelists also will appreciate hearing from you. And you can put your comments of also what you found the most interesting about the session. And just we invite you to stay connected with all of us, and we look forward to seeing you at our future events. Again, thank you so much and have a good rest of your day, afternoon, morning, wherever you are. Yes, thanks so much. Thank you.